Hello, World Civilizations class. Mr. Lassiter with you again as we look today at the Arab Caliphates. These are the Arabic kingdoms that spread from Europe all the way to India. Our video goals for today, questions to consider. How did Islam spread between the years 610 and about the year 1000? What were the major Islamic caliphates? What were the consequences of the Arab conquest? Our vocabulary today: caliph, caliphate, Rashidun Caliphate, Sunni Muslims, Shia Muslims, Umayyad Caliphate, Abbasid Caliphate, and Baghdad. So let's go back to where we were talking about Islam yesterday. Of course, the Prophet Muhammad was the first leader of the Islamic community, and he dies in the year 632. And when he died, there was concern about who would succeed him as the first caliph or successor. Caliph comes from an Arabic word, khalifa, which means successor. A caliphate is an Islamic state led by a caliph. And the first one we're going to talk about is the Rashidun Caliphate. This is one that was not based on family succession, but was instead based on the first four caliphs who were close acquaintances or even relatives of the Prophet. The first four caliphs that make this up are Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. Abu Bakr and Omar kind of rule, and there's not really much controversy with their ruling. But when Uthman is assassinated and Ali becomes caliph, many people were unhappy. Many people saw Uthman and his family as the rightful successors to Islam, or to leading Islam. But when he dies and Ali becomes caliph, many people see this as not the path that should be followed. And so we'll see that this causes a civil war. So in 656, a civil war breaks out between different Muslim groups. On one side, we had those who supported keeping the caliphate in Uthman's clan, or in his family. Those who supported these Umayyads' claim have become known as Sunni Muslims. On the other side, though, those that supported keeping the caliphate with the descendants of Muhammad's first cousin and son-in-law Ali, they've become known as Shia Muslims. And it was this dispute between the Umayyads and Ali's supporters, which culminated in the Battle of the Camel, which you see pictured. Basically, this was the first fitna, or the first civil war between these Islamic groups. Ultimately, the Umayyads win. After they win, they establish the Umayyad Caliphate in 661. And it's going to be around for nearly 100 years, until the year 750. The Umayyads continued early Arab conquests, spreading their empire from Arabia to Spain in the west and India in the east. And so let's go through some of these conquests which we see under the Rashidun Caliphs and the Umayyads. They include the conquering Palestine, Syria, and Egypt, taking those from the Byzantine Empire, conquering the Sassanid Empire in Persia, and like we just said, expanding the empire to the west through North Africa and Spain, and to the east in the Indus River Valley and western India. In fact, the Umayyads even came into contact with the empires of China in the Tang dynasty. Here are the conquests of early Islam. Basically, under the Prophet Muhammad, Islam, or the Arabic kingdoms, spread throughout the Arabian Peninsula. Under the Patriarchal Caliphate, or the Rashidun Caliphate, it spreads further, and a little bit further under the Umayyads. And this is basically the height of these early Islamic conquests. The Umayyads don't last forever, though, and rebellions ultimately result in the Umayyads being overthrown. The family of Abbas, an uncle of Muhammad, eventually takes over and establishes the Abbasid Caliphate. Now keep in mind this is the family of Abbas, not necessarily Abbas himself. He would not have lived this long. But these are the descendants of Abbas. They established a new caliphate and basically controlled the same exact area the Umayyads did, except for a little bit of territory in Spain. And that remains under Umayyad control. So the Abbasids provide basically a renewed religious leadership for Islam. Whereas the Umayyads had weakened over about 100 years, the Abbasids kind of breathe fresh life into this. And they rule with a style that really they get from Persia and the Sassanids. And they're going to set up this city, which you see on the map here, Baghdad, to be a center for their caliphate. Baghdad was especially important as the center of Abbasid culture. The Abbasids supported literature and learning a great deal. And we have translations of Greek texts, secular Arabic poetry in the time thriving because of this support from the Abbasids. It also saw an accelerated rate of conversion of non-Muslims to Islam. We see in this time a lot of Turkish people converting to the religion of the Arabs, Islam. And we also see it spreading into North Africa among the Berbers and even into Spain. So this is something to kind of keep an eye on, this spread of culture with the spread of the empire. Here you see a map of Baghdad, or the Round City, and it basically became one of the most important cities in the world between the years 750 and 900. Later conquests do come about. We have Mamluks who take control of the Abbasid Caliphate. Originally they were conquered peoples who were warriors, and so they were used in the army, and eventually they take control, but they don't remove the Abbasid Caliph. They let him stay in charge, but they basically control the kingdom for a while. Later on we have Seljuk Turks, which you can see on the map here in the dark gray. They take control of the region and even conquer portions of Anatolia, which scares the Christians in Byzantium, or the Byzantine Empire, and makes them ask for some help from Western Europe and Latin Christians. And this will be the beginning of our Crusades. Another caliphate does develop in Egypt and parts of Arabia. This is what we call the Fatimid Caliphate. And it was a Shia caliphate as opposed to Sunni. So let's go to the map and see how this region was changing over time. Here is the world in about the year 600. We see the Eastern Roman Empire, or the Byzantine Empire, and really Arab kingdoms are very small. We see the Persian Sassanid Empire also controlling a lot of territory. And not much has changed when we get to 610 at the time of the Prophet Muhammad's first revelations. But upon his death, we see the spread of an Arabic kingdom in kind of this shipping territories of the Arabian Peninsula. But by 661, about 30 years later, under the Rashidun caliphs, we see Islam spread across the Arabian Peninsula, into Persia, into Syria, and into Egypt. The Umayyads then take control, as we've just talked about, and they rule until 750. And at 750, they're at the height of their control. You can see that their empire stretched all the way from India to Spain, as I keep saying. The Abbasids then take over after the uprisings, and they control a good portion of this region, although their territory will shrink over time. Here in 900s, again, you see the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad, and by the year 1000, it's replaced by this Buayyid Caliphate. But I chose this date to show you the spread of the Fatimids, which you can see in this map. So let's go back to our presentation and talk about Arab conquests and Islamic conversions. We know that the expansion of these caliphates were conquests made by Arabs. They were Arab kingdoms, and many of these people in charge were Islamic, but they did not force people to convert to Islam. However, many people did so out of belief and for social status. So, for example, belief, we had a lot of monotheistic religions in this time period: Christianity and Judaism, Zoroastrianism. So it wasn't that much of a jump to go from those monotheistic religions to this very dominant culture of the Arabs and Islam. And some people were enslaved after being captured in battle, what have you, and they would convert to Islam in some cases because it was against Muslim law to enslave other Muslims. So if you converted to Islam, there was a good chance that you would be freed of your obligations as a slave. Over a few hundred years, a large number of people convert to Islam, and these caliphates become Islamic as well as Arab. Oh, excuse me. Let's try this again. Here we go. So what were the consequences of Arab conquests? Well, the first is that we have the spread of the religion of Islam along with the spread of these kingdoms. That is our easiest one to see. The spread of this religion from Europe even all the way to China. Two, the spread of Arabic culture, education, and language. We said that Arab education was extremely important. The culture itself, we see even the playing of chess in this image from Muslim Spain was spread from Arabia elsewhere. Thirdly, the preservation of many great works of literature, philosophy, science, and math. And the Europeans who come to Arabia in the Crusades will rediscover these and take them back with them to places like Italy and France, where they will spur on the Renaissance. And our fourth was the clash of cultures and religion, or what eventually would become the Crusades. What we see is anytime you have different religions coming in conflict with one another, we see warfare throughout world history. And instead of it being perhaps between Zoroastrians and Christians, in this case, it mainly becomes between Muslims and Christians from Western Europe. There are many more consequences of Arab conquest, but these are the most immediate that we're going to be talking about in class. Review our video goals here on the screen. Make sure that you define the vocabulary terms listed and identify the terms in your digital notebook. If you have any questions, please let me know. Do not hesitate to ask or shoot me an email. This is a lot of information. I've tried to simplify it for you, but it can still be pretty complicated, especially when dealing with Arabic terms and Arabic names. Have a good night, and we'll talk about this in class tomorrow.